Hey folks, this is Tully and welcome to some more game dev. Yesterday we made some really good progress setting up some map editor systems so that we could take files from a TSV file and import them into our game engine to kind of generate the floor, as well as we figured out how to set up some kind of prop groups and generate those into the edges of the board based off of, again, some symbols placed in our TSV files. So center tree, back tree, a bush, some stones, all just represented by some letters. And then when we import the file, it brings in the map. That went pretty well. I'm pretty happy with the progress we made yesterday. I spent a long time in the first stream yesterday talking about how we'd been stuck for a long time, and I won't rehash all of that, but I will say that I feel like we've made progress, which is what I really wanted to do. So now that we're kind of got some motion and we are, like, not just stuck, but actually moving forward, I think the next thing I'd like to do is some sort of system for item pickups. Off stream, I kind of did a little bit of like placement of this little sword object. I went and found a icon that Trixie had made a while ago, flipped it around, and then kind of placed it here in the ground, and then placed a couple of these little grass tiles around it to kind of give the indication that maybe this is an old sword that's been stuck in the ground. And I want to be able to pick this item up. And we have cutscenes in which we can have little moments happen when we interact from a specific point of view. And those are, I think, the basis of our item pickups. I think an item pickup is going to be essentially a cutscene that is going to add a specific item to our inventory, or maybe even do something even less specific than that. It might even just be that the item pickup might just have some event that fires that says to do something in the game, like, oh, you unlocked the key, well, we should set a flag that you now have that key, so any areas that were locked will now be open when you walk up and interact with them. So the item may not be a physical object that we put into like an inventory. The item might also just be, toggling a flag, or in this case, when we pick up the sword, I want to unlock the slash ability for you to have in combat. So that all being said, I guess the next question is, how do we go about doing that? So let's take a look at that read interact that we have. So if we copy this, bring this over here, this is an interact tile. So this is saying this tile here would like to play this ability, which is essentially a cutscene. We'll take a look at that. And we want to trigger the cutscene with this trigger name. So this is what we're going to activate. This is a parameter, and this is the data for what should show up on the interact kind of prompt that the character sees or the player sees below their feet, telling them what they're going to do. It's essentially a verb for what the character is going to do by doing the interact action. So for the sign, it's reading. For this, it might be like pick up. Let's take a look at this interact cutscene. Interact cutscene. This exists here inside of some design data tile, and then we have several different types of cutscenes. We have immediate cutscenes. This is an ability with a bunch of different data on it, but at its core, it is clearing the right trigger, so that's what makes the prompt disappear during the cutscene. And then it's triggering a cutscene, play immediate, and it's blocking. The player can't do any inputs other than what the cutscene requests, so like pushing A to advance the dialogue. So the player can't move around during this cutscene. And then the cutscene trigger is empty. So I'm going to guess that that's where we set up this logic. This trigger name must get passed through somehow. So if we do a search on trigger name, find all references, we can see that that is being used when we instantiate the ability object. We grab that ability, we get its cutscene trigger ability effect that should be in its children, and then we set that trigger cutscene ability effect trigger ID essentially to be whatever was on the tile data. And then we also update the display data to have whatever the display name is, so that when we walk up, the interact prompt shows the correct information. Okay, so there's a couple of ways of doing this. I think the simplest approach is probably to have either a more advanced interact tile or a new version of this that's like a pickup tile. Let's start with pickup tile because I think it's going to be easier to merge these if we decide that the functionality is similar enough that they should be the same, whereas it'll be trickier to separate them. So let's start with the assumption that we need to merge them. Sorry, Visual Studio's having a big think. And might be crashing. Super fun. Okay, I guess we'll let it crash. Technical difficulties, please stand by. Huh. Yeah, I can't get Windows to realize that Visual Studio is broken. We will force the matter. Oh, no. Okay, it took a really long time, but Visual Studio figured itself out. Let's go back to this view. Okay, so eventually it did just restart. So we're going to change this to pickup tile, and we're going to assume that everything's fine. That doesn't look fine. What is happening? Just restarts Visual Studio. Yeah. Okay, cool. We're gonna close Visual Studio and reopen it one more time here. Make sure that it's okay. Seems to be. Okay, so then we're going to rename this to pickup tile, and then this is a core tile interact data. Interesting. We can only have one interact per tile, but we can have multiple cutscenes per tile. And this is the on enter, so when you step onto a tile, multiple things can happen. But we can only have one interact. I guess that makes sense. It doesn't really make a ton of, like, it wouldn't really work if I wanted to have multiple triggers happen from an interact. In most situations, I would imagine we just want one consolidated thing to happen. So if we want to make this pickup separate, we would need a separate data structure for it. How does this actually get used in the end? The board generates... Let's go back in here and take a look at the trigger name again. Where was that being used? Here. So it instantiates an ability. I still think we're going to be instantiating an ability. Okay, yeah. Looking at the code a little closer, I think I am willing to say that we can just modify pickup or interact to handle the extra logic we're going to need, rather than generate a whole other set of like instantiation logic. We'll just funnel it through. So when we interact, when we do this interact tile, the data that we have to pass through is a trigger name and a display name. Interesting. So what I'm thinking about is we're probably going to want to be able to very rapidly create new cutscenes for each interact. If I want to make a chest that, say, drops like a potion that can heal you, then I'm probably going to want like a potion item ID that I can pass into this system to be like, hey, play the standard pickup cutscene, do the interact animation. So we'll use the interact cutscene so the character reaches out, interacts with something, and then maybe we make a more specific version of this and we make a like not just interact cutscene, but like a interact and item display cutscene. So we make a variation of this prefab that instead of just doing like animation trigger, it also has like some extra logic that tries to display an item above the character's head, like Zelda or something. Just random ideas, but like that seems like potentially a neat thing to do. Or like Final Fantasy Tactics, like the jumping and picking something up. I think that's probably a little too dynamic for what we're looking for here, but we might want to have some controls. And so we could make a more specific version of the cutscene that would need still the sub cutscene that we're actually triggering. So this is the object that we're going to run, and it'll do some interactions on the world. But then we have like the like actual like cutscene trigger, which is all the dialogue, as well as could interact with the world. They both can change. Both of these objects can change the world. But I feel like I'm not going to want to rebuild, like, say, the character jumping and the item appearing above their head every single time. So anything that's reusable across multiple different cutscenes, we would put inside of this prefab. But anything that is specific to this item or this item's pickup sequence would need to go inside of the triggered cutscene. So yeah, there's like two different ways of manipulating stuff, and I think I'm gonna just have to, because they're both flexible, I'm gonna have to just have some design constraints where I decide like, hey, don't just be like doing everything everywhere because it'll get confusing and hard to manage. So I think I want some sort of like identification of which item we're picking up, so that could be fed into any kind of like visibility. Any kind of a visibility kind of stuff. Anything that would be repeatable might need to know that information. But like I said like 5 minutes ago, it might not just be like picking up an item. The system might also just be like setting a flag. Okay, let's take a look at our cutscene we built yesterday real quick. So this was Branching Paths, I think is what we called it. So this is a cutscene that just has one sequence. It's just one thing that it does, which is triggering the dialogue. And this is the dialogue asset that has all the data about that dialogue, who it's playing on and everything else. So if we wanted to, we could add more sequences here. So if we wanted to do, say, setting a flag, I believe that's in the back end. Set flag. So if we wanted to have a cutscene set a flag, we could just do that here. I need water. I'll be right back. Okay. So I don't want to have to, every time I make a new cutscene that sets a flag, it feels like it would be a hassle to come into here, create the cutscene, then come into the cutscene, add the sequence step to set a flag, add the flag ID and the status I want that flag to go to, active, complete, or not started. I think I'd rather have the ability to just do that here and that just get fed through automatically. That could be reasonable. And then if I wanted to have like an item be displayed, we could add that information. The problem is if we're doing multiple different variations of this thing, then the structure is going to become very muddy, and it's going to have a lot of parameters that don't really make sense in all situations. Am I going to need another editor here? I'm probably going to need a special editor to display this thing in different states. Or we do some inheritance, which probably is the right answer here. So our data processing system reads through all of our interact tiles that we find underneath our room kind of object, and then puts all that data into our tile data system. Yeah, I don't want to have like a different type of interact data structure for every single one of these. But if we had a different one for each type of interact, you could do whether or not it was setting a flag or setting, picking up an item, or just playing a cutscene with no data change, then the structures would just look fine. But I shouldn't have to change my data to make the editor look good. Okay. What would be the things I would need? I would probably need the trigger name. I would need the display to show for the interact. In this situation, I might need a string for the flag ID I was changing. So this would be for modifying a flag. And we would need the flag status enum, and we'd need a flag status that we're setting. We'd also potentially need item information. So if we were picking up an item, we might want to know about that item. Is this the right one? Yeah, I have not worked with the inventory system in probably like 2 years, to be honest with you. So that's going to be a fun part of today's setup. This seems right though. I think an item object is what we care about. The problem is we don't want to drag a specific item in. We probably want to have an ID for the item. Let's take a look. So the item system I currently have, I built like I said, a couple of years ago, and it was based off of a Unity package that I don't know if it's even fully like supported anymore. And I stopped updating it because it moved more towards like mobile kind of item setups, and the earlier editions had a lot more flexibility in the way that you could like assign properties to them. So I have these very old versions of items, and so this has like a key of sword_1, and then it has some mutable properties which I'm assigning like stats and equipment type, as well as like iconography and particles. So I have like a bunch of properties I can assign to items. And if I remember correctly, this is also based off of the hold here. We also built a system so that we could have all of these items in a spreadsheet, set all of this data up, and then I wrote an importer that actually imports all of our data from a TSV file with all of these potential things. Yeah, I had a lot of information I could assign to them. And those got all of those sections get put into the mutable property section, in which I could manipulate and check those informations. Oh yeah, I also did amounts, because the allocation system didn't quite work the way I wanted it to, because each time you added an item, it would add another instance of it. Yeah, there were problems with trying to use this like Game Foundation's like inventory system. There's a world realistically where I probably want to build something myself, because I already have my data for my items pre-built. I just might want to build my own kind of database setup, but we could replace that relatively easily. Think about it like a building block. I could essentially pull a building block out and replace it with this setup instead, or with a new setup. So this is an inventory item. This is its ID. We have an item factory, which creates items, which is used part of our team management system, which is for Heir of Embers. I have not built out anything specific for... Yeah, because we have like the equipment screens from Heir of Embers, but we haven't built anything for infinite retries. We'd have to bring that logic over and create new scripts. Okay. That's fair. Yeah, we're digging in. This is going to be bigger than I thought it was. There's a lot to relearn here, which is okay. What's the other spots where this is used? The ad here during the testing store, setting up a store for buying and selling items, like a weapons vendor or whatever. So this would be some sort of string ID. I don't know how exactly we would get like from this ID to a specific item, because we'd need to do like, I think it's like inventory manager get items, current inventory. Okay, this just spits out all the items that we currently have. But if I want to find item by definition, I can also find item by ID. Okay. Okay, so I think it would be a string ID that we put in here for the item that we would be working with. So these are two versions of modifications that we would do when picking up an item. We could set a flag, like if you pick up a key, we just set a flag that you now have that key. And then sometimes we might pick up an item and actually physically add a specific item to your inventory. What would be other things that we might do beyond flag, item info? Unlocking abilities would be the other thing. So when we do unlock ability, we usually do that through the skill tree, but I'm starting to think I might want to move some of the ability unlocking stuff out and into the world, or at least I want to prototype and experiment with it. So this unlock happens via here, unlock, and we tell the unit state to add an ability spec with the unlocking abilities ID here, and this is for the node system. So if we want to unlock a node not from here, but from somewhere else, do we ever do that? From the starting screen, right. So when we built the starting screen, which is how we're currently giving you slash, we built this system to grab the backend state manager, get the unit's persistent data, and then add an ability spec, and then immediately equip that ability. So this is how we would want to unlock an ability. So there's a possibility that we might also want to do ability to unlock. And the way that we were doing that was via also an ID. So this would be string, and this would be ability unlock. Unlocking ability ID. It can probably just be ability ID. Right, this is the cutscene ability, but this is so this is the different kind of ability. This is going to be ability spec ID. So if we come back over here, let's close out this inventory screen for now. Take a look at the scenes. Yeah, so now we have all this information inside of the interact tile. But in most situations, we wouldn't ever need to fill in these four fields, and we'd never want to fill in anything beyond the flag, item, or ability spec at the same time. We'd only want to fill in one. Maybe that's not true. I guess it's possible that we might want to both set a flag and add an item to your inventory. There's a world in which that might make sense. It's also worth noting, this might be redundant. This is a really technical stream. I'm sorry for that. Unlikely we're going to have people sticking around to even hear the apology, but what I'm realizing is that our cutscene system, so if we go back to branching paths, when we created this cutscene with our cutscene generation system, I'm pretty positive that I also auto-generated a flag for this cutscene. So if we go look at our JSON files, it's going to be under flag design data. If we scroll all the way to the bottom, there's not any custom ones here. Is it in a different one? Cutscene design data? We made this cutscene design data for branching paths. And I think inside of our cutscene design data, where we use this in the flag backend manager, we generate a flag for every cutscene. This comment is a copy and paste. We will toggle these, I believe, when we trigger a cutscene. Yeah, there's two different ways we can set flags. One is from the gets called from the board, the transition manager, loading the global scene, and the ability start screen. This one here, cutscene complete. If we trigger a cutscene, we set that cutscene to complete when it's done, which is how we're currently doing it with the interact. We also set the cutscene to complete if we trigger it internally from like specific, like hard-coded ones. Yeah, there's a couple of different ways to complete. Actually, I want to follow a thread here. Something seems odd to me that we call this, because we're doing trigger cutscene immediately. Oh, I see. Okay, so this is getting the cutscene. Then once we have the cutscene loaded, we wait until it's done, and then we basically export all of the data, all of the sequence steps from that cutscene into our sequence steps, and then call complete at the end, because we're not calling it through the normal system, but we're doing this because we want to have it be inserted inside of an existing sequence. That's complicated, but the point is that yeah, this is valid. So whenever we complete a cutscene, we set it to complete. And I think that's true of repeating cutscenes too then. So some of our cutscenes are repeatable, so we can have like the prevent leaving left. Yeah, so this is if you go into the cutscene for the Omni weapon and you try and turn around and leave. This is a repeatable cutscene that pushes you back towards it. But I think even though it's repeatable, nothing about repeatable stops it from being completed. Okay, so if we wanted to save on flags, realistically, we would never really need to have a interact and then set some custom flag for you found the key. The you found the key cutscene that we would use could already be set to complete. I think this is a tricky one, because there's so I'm just talking aloud to myself and not really explaining this, and I think I'm getting a little lost myself. So let's copy one of these existing examples. Sure, this one's pretty basic. So pick up items is what we're working on today. So what we're saying is that we have a item pickup behavior. That's going to have potentially a flag that it wants to set. Set flag. It's going to have some item, and it might have some ability it wishes to unlock. So this is like when we want to pick up an item, these are the things we probably care about affecting in the back end. Now when we set a flag, there's two ways we can do this. Set flag for cutscene. So this is the cutscene is setting a flag when it's done. When cutscene is complete, set flag. So every cutscene, maybe that's a better way to say that. Every cutscene sets a flag to complete on execution. Honestly, every cutscene sets a flag to complete. The other way that we can set a flag is we can set custom flag given a flag ID, set it to a specific status. And so my thought process here that I'm trying to get through is which of these two options do I want, or do I actually want to operate on both? What are some other things that I've got rolling around in my head as I kind of think through this? We need to unlock the ability. And I think that that unlocking of the ability can come directly from the item pickup moment. So the item pickup could directly unlock the ability. Trigger cutscene is another aspect of this. Oh, didn't mean to switch pages that time. Okay, so let's draw a line out from each of these because I want to follow this through. So when we do trigger cutscene, that triggering of the cutscene will itself set a flag. And then we could have the set flag logic directly set a custom flag as well, or we could cancel this section and instead just rely on the flag that's being set by the cutscene that we trigger. I guess the question mark here becomes, is this always custom? Is this always triggering a custom cutscene in every single situation? Because I think that's how I've been thinking about the cutscenes. Like when I walk in here, I don't know if we did anything that's going to cause the game to crash, but when I walk in here, and I walk up to this sign that we created, and we do read here, it would make sense that this read would be unique for this area. But if I was to walk up here and interact, if I'm just picking up a sword, I may not even want to trigger... Oh wow, that's a thought. Do I even want to trigger a specific cutscene? I think for this one, the answer is yes. We'd want to have Hero say something about like, oh, it's a rusty old sword or something, and it's like there's some notification of what this is. But if we were to think about like a different map might have just some item set up here as like a chest, then like if this chest just has a random potion in it that's like a less major cutscene moment, we may not want a custom cutscene. We may want something where Hero just picks up the item appears above Hero's head, it says like potion unlocked or something, and then Hero goes back to being in control, or the player goes back to being in control and can just move forward, and there's no dialogue, there's no custom information, there's nothing specific to that. We would just give it we would just give the interact the item name, and everything else would be the same. The question then becomes, if this is not giving you a like potion, but is instead giving you a specific key, that we want to make it so that now that key being picked up is going to unlock a gate somewhere else, or give you access to something that we will track via a flag being set. Would we want a custom cutscene where Hero mentions that key? I think in most situations, yes, because we would want some sort of highlighting that this is a key item. But I think that there might be also spots where we might want to set a flag for you having picked up some key item, but we don't want to make a big deal about it. And so we may not want to trigger a custom cutscene. We might just want to set a flag. So I think this can be optional, which is something I hadn't been thinking about. And if that's the case, there will be other situations where we might have a cutscene that's a cutscene that's super specific, and we won't need to set a custom flag. We can just let the cutscene flag be the flag that we check against, so we don't make two when we don't need them. So these both have purposes, and they're both optionals. And then obviously when we're reading a sign, we're not going to pick up an item, so this is optional. And then this is also optional. So all of these are potentially usable. We can hook them up, but we don't have to. I think the short version, though, is that we do want each one, though. Actually, okay, let's talk about items. So, grant item. Item appears in player's inventory. There's a world in which instead of unlocking the ability from the pickup, it's the interact itself, we could potentially instead have it so that the item you pick up is like a passive item that in turn by being added to your inventory unlocks the ability. In which case we wouldn't need this bottom section, because we could just chain the unlocking of the ability off of the item being given to you. The nice thing about like a on pickup event is what we're talking about. Is that some sort of on pickup event could be used for more than just unlocking the ability. I think I do it this way. On pickup could be doing a number of things. It could be unlocking ability. I guess technically it could be setting a flag. That would allow us to also remove this section. I mean, to be perfectly honest, it could also trigger a cutscene, but there are situations where we won't want to add an item. I guess this is the weird thing about this idea, is if we go this direction, it means that we would need to generate items to set flags, or we'd need to make items to unlock abilities. And that feels cumbersome. And then we potentially generate a whole bunch of dummy items that have no real purpose in the player's inventory. Yeah, which is why I think the base idea we have here makes more sense, that if it doesn't require an item, then don't make an item for it. Instead, just show the player that we're making it, or show the player that something's happened, that the player has picked something up, and then set a flag that'll change the world in some way, or unlock an ability directly, because we don't need an item to represent that. I think it's more interesting if the item, like on equip, add ability, that becomes more interesting. Like, that's something I could see making sense. But I think I don't want to go down that route right now. We could in the future, but not for this game. Okay. So I think I do want all this data. That's what I've talked myself into. There are situations where they make sense, and I am not adding bloat by adding this field. I can choose not to use it and instead use the cutscene, or I could choose not to make a cutscene and just make a flag. Okay. I guess when I say make a flag, the flags are auto-generated from the cutscenes. In the situation where I would want to have a flag for this, I would just need to make one from scratch. That's okay. That's not a big deal. That's probably still easier than making, say, like an item that in turn creates a flag. I could make like even a separate design data file that's like even just called like key flags or something, key item flags, and it's just a list of all the key items in the game. And instead of making full-on items for each one, it's just we generate a flag for each one. I guess the only reason we would want to instead create a key item object is if we actually wanted to have some sort of item that we add to your inventory that you could physically see. But if we do, we could always have that be a separate system as well. Yeah, because I don't think I would want any key items to operate the same way as like a piece of equipment. It just doesn't need all that data associated with it. Okay. Okay, let's assume that this is fine. Let's assume we've talked it all out. We spent like 30 minutes talking it over. We can say, yeah, this is good. We're happy with this idea that we have this extra data here. In this situation then, let's assume that we're going to do, of the optional parameters in this situation, I'm not going to grant you an item. I'm not going to set a custom flag because we're going to have a custom cutscene. So we'll have a custom cutscene that we're setting, and we're going to have an ability unlock that happens after that cutscene. So those are the two things we want to try and accomplish here. Let's start here. So W01, sword pickup. Let's make a new cutscene called sword pickup. Let's set the default trigger name. We can have hero say something along the lines of an old rusty sword. I guess it's better than being unarmed. And then we can have this be a stay open medium, and then after this it closes. Then maybe we have another moment where we'll create some sort of interact where Hero picks it up and then something happens. Like some sort of like the item disappears, we'll do some stuff. And then I don't think I can fully make this realized with the animations we have right now, but we can say narratively the Omni weapon absorbed it. So Hero will vocalize the thing that I can't show very well. So this is tell not show because I just don't have the tech. So this will close self. Hero will interact. We'll see some sort of eventual thing where the Omni weapon is picked up. Right now we're using the AHA audio for all of this. That's fine. We'll worry about replacing the audio later. That's probably good. Let's create that sequence. Okay. So that should have generated it down in here somewhere. Yep, so sword pickup. This is the trigger name. So if we go back in here and we assign that trigger name here, that'll be the sword pickup. We will set a flag. What were the flag names? Oh, the flag name just ends up being the trigger name, right? Okay, that makes sense. So whatever the cutscene we triggered, that same name is set to complete. So we'll know that the sword has been completed. I guess here's the last thought I'm going to have. Is there a reason why in this situation we can't just have this custom cutscene unlock the ability? So we could have like the custom cutscene grant the item, set the flag, do all of this stuff for us. But I think in situations where the cutscene is reusable, it makes more sense to have the flags and the items be their own separate thing. But in situations where they're a one-off event, which I think all of our unlock abilities are going to be rare moments, we won't be making a ton of these. So I do think there's a world in which when we're making a custom cutscene for the unlocking of a new ability by finding a new weapon that the Omni weapon can absorb, which is narratively what I'm thinking is going to happen, I think maybe we don't need this. Maybe we don't make this so flexible because we just don't need to repeat it that often. So then the question becomes, can we create a sequence step that unlocks an ability. And I don't think we have that tech right now, but it should be relatively easy to make. So if we come look at our sequence steps, let's look for that set flag one. Set flag sequence step. So in here, if we copy this, oh, Visual Studio, I believe. Did you figure it out? Good job. All right, so set flag. This will now be unlock ability sequence step. I'm gonna assume I haven't made one of these already. Copy that. Okay, come on, open. Thank you. The shortened name for this will be unlock ability. It will do the same tech that we saw the starting screen do. It will need a ability ID, which will get used here and here. We don't need a flag status. We need to update the constructors. Like so. Okay. So now that that class is constructed, we should just be able to add that as a new sequence step. So inside of the cutscene we just made sword pickup, we can add a backend unlock ability sequence, and we can add slash as the ability it's unlocking. That should be enough. In Forest TO2, we have a room info enemy tutorial, ability tutorial complete. I want to set this too because this will turn on our UI. Backend set flag, ability tutorial complete. This should turn on the UI so we can see the slash being added. I don't know if this is where this will actually happen, but for the sake of testing in this map locally, I just want to see. Okay, so we turned on the UI with the ability tutorial complete, but we did not see slash get added and equipped. Oh, did not mean to modify that. Interesting. Why would that fail? Yeah, we're just not seeing the ability. Let's turn on an enemy real quick. Where is our enemy setup? Enemy spawn. Enemy spawn 1. Doesn't really matter which one we use, but... There we go. Let's put one down this way so it's not interfering with us until we actually reveal it by heading down. And then if this isn't working, I'll do some debugging and try and figure out what's going on. If I had to guess... Oh, you know what it might be? Yeah, I can't attack. We don't reload the character. We generate the character when we enter the map, and so slash hasn't been added to... So we've added slash in the back end, but the version of hero that's generated on this map doesn't have it. We would have to rebuild hero. If we look at equip ability, the actual logic here, when we set an ability to equipped, what happens? We use it here. This is just some spec stuff. Load unit state. This is for save load. Is that also happening every time we load a map? Where does this happen? Yeah, I think... I think each time we open a map, we load the character. This is going to be not in the back-end state, but in the dungeon is what I'm trying to spell. Dungeon state manager. This loads the character. We spawn the player in. When we spawn the player in, we check what unlocked abilities they have, and we spawn each ability. And this only happens on character spawn. So we'd need to rework our system so this can happen when we pick up the item. Huh. Interesting. I mean, the simple approach to this would be to just ignore it and not have enemies on this map. So that when you find your first enemy, it is in a different area and you unlock the skill after. I guess the trick would be, can we even spawn an ability later? Yeah, there's some weird stuff happening with spawning the player too. Spawn each ability, set the, if spawn count is 1, spawn the player. If spawn count is equal to 1, spawn the player. Player container. so when we load the player, we initialize it with all the loaded abilities. And how does that go through? That just updates each of the ability components with the ability and the ability component. Okay, we can do this. It's annoying, but okay, so what we can do is we can make a spawn ability late. After player is probably a better way to describe what we're doing here. Do we keep track of the player? Yeah, we keep track of the player's container. So we have access to the player. When we do this call, it is after we have instantiated. So this dungeon player manager, this is in the same class. Okay, so this is doing the spawn. This is getting the unlocked abilities. So we're going to want to do this chunk of code. And this will be what this first function is. And then we will need another one. Async. I'm not sure a better name for this for now, so we'll just do that. And then this function needs access to the ability spec that we're trying to load. This adds it to the list of loaded. I don't think load count matters in this situation. This might cause problems if we're transitioning between an area at the same time, but I think that's going to be hard for the player to pull off. Instead of adding this to the, well, we probably is this only ever used in spawn player? Yeah, so this shouldn't be necessary. We just want to take the loaded ability, and then in the player container, we're going to get M abilities. Get component abilities. And with that abilities component, we should be able to update it with the new one we've just loaded. So how do we do that here? For each ability, we do abilities.update ability. Perfect, we can do this. So we just take this chunk of code here, just a small bit, and we'll want to do the same thing at this level. And this will be the object.transform that we're setting. Interesting. Ability get ability type component, ability type get input doesn't work in this context. Oh, because we need to be using core. That's probably fine. We'll see if that causes other problems. Okay, so if we now call spawn ability after player, it will grab the ability specs, ability ID, grab the ability design data, pass that into this spawn ability after player async. It'll do all the same stuff it normally does when it spawns an ability, and then instead of doing the load of the player and then initializing, we're taking whatever we do when we initialize all the abilities and doing it here in this chunk of code. So then all we should have to do is when we unlock here, we'll also want to do dungeon state manager dot instance dot. Oh, right. We can't directly modify the dungeon stuff. We encapsulate it. So this is used here. So we're going to need a function in here in the player section, which normally we never have to modify the player, it looks like. So we will do player accessor function, and then this will be the player manager add ability is not public. Here. This wants to take an ability spec. I'm not entirely sure if that's correct. I guess technically speaking, we don't have access to the ability spec at this point. Here we do. Can we get the ability spec? Not easily. I'm going to try adding this directly inside of the equip so that when we equip it, we also update it, which I think could make sense. Mixed feelings on this though, because I'm not sure we'll always be in a situation where the player even exists. I guess we could check for that. Are you finding the wrong one? Okay, that's another reason not to put it in persistent data. This doesn't know which version of the game we're working on. Yeah, this is specific to infinite retries. Okay, so we will put it here, which means we need a way of getting access to the ability spec. Add gives us a reference to it. Ability spec. That gives us access. This is still finding the wrong one. Yeah, so we'll have to do infinite retries dot, which I'm not thrilled about. But it's fine. Okay. That should work. Safety measures. We should make sure that a couple of things. We should make sure that the instance of this exists. This isn't one that's going to like try and make a version of itself. No, if it can't find it, it just doesn't do anything. So that's good. So if does not equal null, then try to spawn an ability after player, but only do this if the dungeon's initialized. I don't even think we need that. We'll just try. We'll just give this a shot. I can't imagine a situation in which you would create or unlock a new ability via a sequence in which the player doesn't exist or the dungeon hasn't been loaded. Like maybe there's a world if we do like cutscenes that happen off camera where we don't spawn a version of the player. But if we get to that, I will find that bug and deal with it then. Okay, we did add slash, it appeared here, but we got a null reference here on can perform checks. And this was on the usability text trying to check the stats component. And this happened before awake. Maybe? Yeah, owner would be null on the on enable, I think, is what's happening here. I think that's slightly safer, but less memory efficient, or less, it's less performant. I'm gonna give that a shot and see if that fixes it. What a weird timing issue that that's not a problem all the time. But I guess what's happening is, as part of adding it, we are getting to the UI referencing it before we even get a chance to pass forward one frame and hit awake. But then I would imagine we wouldn't have gotten into adding the observer yet even, but I guess the on enable is happening first. Nope, same problem. Okay, so that's not it. It is technically happening on open. So if we do that, I think that might happen. No, I don't know if that'll even matter. There's a lot of weird contextual stuff here that's hard to describe, but the timing issue here is for sure annoying because it's happening on screen open. And that's as far back as the call stack's going. Yeah, I think we're gonna have to put a breakpoint here. Yeah, because this is getting called from the invoke of the sequence. Oh, it isn't this sequence, it's the player turn. I guess the other thing we could do before we go debugging is, yeah, slash clone. So slash didn't get put underneath. Unlock ability, spawn after player, spawn after player. Here, ability dot transform parent equals object dot. Oh, that's the wrong. That's the wrong object. That, I think, is what we care about. I think that was a weird copy and paste bug because object was used here. But if we go look at the actual initializing player here, oh no, I did make that change. I just gave it the wrong value. Yeah, so in this situation, it should be the object. It should be the current player container.transform. Yeah. Okay, let's give that a shot. I just wasn't parenting it to the right thing. What other weird edits did I make? This is what I'm thinking of. Let's also undo that. Okay. Yep, unlocked slash, and yeah, I can try and use it. Let's re-add the enemy combatant and see if we can fight with that ability after unlocking it mid-run. This one here, turn it on, save the game so that it actually places the enemy in the data, and away we go. Okay. I should really have this zoomed in like that, so even if we don't have it full screened, we're still seeing more of it. Next part of this. So we have the ability to pick up an item. That item is triggering a cutscene, which is setting a cutscene flag, and then the cutscene is also... These aren't really chaining. I've got this written up like I'm chaining them, but it's really more like this. The cutscene is both setting a cutscene flag when the cutscene completes, and it's also giving us the ability to unlock the ability. The next thing we'd like to do is we want to change the environment. This is something I want for several different features in the next little bit here, so it's a good thing to work on. I want to be able to have certain props be visible based off of a flag that exists. So in this situation, when the cutscene is over, or via potentially a custom flag I might create, I want to have this prop disappear. Currently, the prop system does not do anything even close to that. So really, inside of here, for the custom sword, we're going to need to add like a visibility flag. And when we generate the board, we're going to need that sword object to be on update, checking to see if that flag has changed, or be subscribed to that flag's change. Because I think that's a thing we can do. I think we have an event system when flags get modified. Event or flag backend manager, set status. Inside of a individual flag, these are all interfaced iFlag. These have flash, I keep saying flash, flag callback events. So there's a screen component that requires specific flags. That's how we're toggling the UI on and off, right? And so it checks to see if, or it adds a callback for each of those flags. And if the flag is required, it'll display, otherwise it'll set to false. And it calls refresh component anytime one of these flags are modified, just to kind of check to see, hey, are all these flags true? Yes, then set it to active. Okay, and we can just get a flag by ID, set its callback, and then call a function once that flag has been modified. Does this only happen on success? No, it just happens anytime the flag is modified. Okay, perfect. So yeah, I need these components to have some sort of system to check if a specific flag has been modified, and if it's at a visibility that doesn't match that prop's wanted visibility, it turns itself off. So then the question is, what is this object? That's the sprite renderer part of it. But we make a whole clone that has a tile offset component. And then this is for distance from camera. What other scripts? Pixel alignment. That's all fine. These are just objects that we use to reference the tops and bottoms of objects if we need them. So tile offset is really the only kind of unique script on here. Where does it get its data from? Like set offset, set rotation? This happens on load inside of prop tile, but I think this only happens at editor time. Yeah, this is prop loaders. I don't think we use the prop loaders. Here, tile. Yeah, so when we load a prop, tile offset is the only thing on it that we actually change. It doesn't have any concept of like a script. It can have an animator. How does that work? Because we 100% animate props in some of our other cutscenes. Okay, let's save this. We must have some way of modifying them, because we can tell, I tell the Omni weapon to turn off at different points in the Dungeon Castle TO4. In here, this Omni weapon, when we take it, we trigger this Omni weapon cutscene, which happens here. Prop 6, 10. Okay. Right. So I built a system where this prop specifically has a entity component, and we use its entity component to modify it. does have an entity and animation component. Why? Like, why does the sword not have that, but this one does? Is it because they're different types of objects? Oh, you know what? I bet you it is. So if we take a look at, it's going to be under art. Let's minimize a bunch of these. Just arrow key left in order to reduce it down. Under the art section, not for characters, not for the dungeon stuff here, but if we go to dungeon props and we take a look at the demon castle, there are a number of animation props. And these animation props have animations, but not all of them have entities. Okay, so the entities are getting added somewhere else. So if we take back a look in here, this is where we're doing that. We construct an entity ID based off of its position in the grid, which means we can't have two animating props on the same tile, which might be a problem for another day. Oh, I guess technically if the index is greater than 0, yeah, so if there's multiple props, then they'll get an index. So there is, I do have some way of differentiating them, but it's not great. Get component has animator. So it's not even checking to see if it has the animation script, it's checking to see if it has an animator at this level. And this overrides prop base animation, and then there's also prop base. So there's two different types of props. Okay, so then when we do sprite, this button here, probably below my head, the sprite folder to props generates all our props for us. How does it know? Is it just based off folder? How does it know which prefab to use? Animation prefab component. When we create a prop, we check to see whether or not that prop has a animation controller object created. And if it does, then we create it with its animation. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's explain. All right. So essentially what's happening now is I want to have a prop disappear once picked up. That's the event that I'm trying to figure out how to do. And so my thought process was that I wanted to have the prop object have a script that checks for visibility or enables / disable via flag. But now I went and looked and I realized, oh, there's already the concept of an animation prop object, which you can control via entity lookup, and then you can do play animation, which can be basically an empty frame, which is the same as like disabling it or turning it off for our purposes. And so I'm like, okay, well, this can do... I was thinking of doing it this way with enabling and disabling it via flags, but we already have this animation prop system that already exists. So the question becomes, do I have the prop disappear via the animation system we already have, or do I build this enable disable flag system? The reason why I'm thinking about this system in the first place is because eventually I want to do a completely different like feature, which is going to be like events, which is going to be a future system. And the reason I was thinking about this is I wanted to have certain props basically be on or disabled based off of whether or not an event has happened. So the event system is going to be like specific flags are set at specific times, at moments flags are set at specific times is what the event system is really going to boil down to. And so my thought process was, if I gave the props an enable disable flag system, then I could just very easily have certain props be visible or not visible based off of whether or not a certain event is happening, essentially. And so like, because these two because I eventually want to do this, I was thinking that I want to solve this problem here in the same way. But one special rule that I have for events is, how do I put this? Props should only disappear or appear if entering room for first time. So when you first enter into a room, and if an event is active, then it appears. But if you come into that room and then just spend a bunch of time waiting there, I don't want like a whole bunch of props to suddenly just turn on and that event starts. So like, events can only happen if you enter that room during the period of time in which the event could be happening. So this system I want to do for this doesn't actually need dynamically changing props. So that's the question. That's the question. Is this dynamic or only on room load? If it's dynamic, then we could make this system, because we're going to need it for the events anyways, and we could use this dynamic system for when you pick up the item. If the enabling and disabling via flags is not dynamic and is only on room load, then this would only be useful for this feature, and we can kind of worry about this later, and we should probably use the animation prop object. Well. Let's try it. Let's see how difficult it would be to set up the sword to disable as an animation prop, opposed to if we were to just do this flag system. Because this is there is a amount of effort involved in making this an animation prop instead of just a sword that appears on the ground. But setting up a custom flag to disable the prop is also some amount of work as well. I think that they're both going to be about the same, so it doesn't really matter too much. Let's file, open, sword. We'll leave the sword prop in the same spot here, but we'll make a new variation of it. Oh, I want to file, open Demon Castle, animation props. Oh. Sorry, trying to track something down. This one, A Sprite. Okay. So this is an example of that Omni weapon display that we had. So there's an idle, which is its default state, and then there's an anim 2 looping, which is it empty. So I think we want to do the same thing. So we just want to make this first frame be a new tag, which is called idle, which is going to be its default state. And then we'll add a new frame, which is empty, and idle will only be on frame 1. And then this new one, I want to make sure I get the naming correct. Anim 2 looping will be on this frame. New tag anim frame looping, okay? And this can be anim 1 because it's only going to have one animation. So it's going to go from this loop to this loop, which effectively is making it disappear. This is adding a huge amount of empty space. Yeah, this is probably dumb. All right, I'm going to continue though. So I'm going to save this out. File, export sprite sheet. Okay, so we are setting this up to export with by row output array to this PNG and JSON locations. So we'll export that. We should be able to come back into Unity. That has been exported into the forest anim props section, and that is this sprite sheet, which looks like this, the sword, and then the empty frame next to it. And then, oh, it didn't put this in the right spot, but that's fine. So we'll move that over. So now it has the JSON file that describes these two frames, as well as its animation layers and which animations are on which frame. And so then if we come back into Sprites forest props and recreate the forest props, it should make a new anim prop for 24_sword, which is this one. It has the animation system. It did not use the right prop. What? Animation props. This should have an animation component associated with it. The grass does. This does not. Does it have an animation here? Oh, because I'm doing it in the wrong order. Okay, that's fine, fair. Tooling could be better. I could make it this a little more clear, but if we go props, slice props, that'll slice the sword into hopefully 2 different images. No, it failed. I think it's upset because this one already exists. Oh, we're in play mode. That might also be part of it. Let's try that again. Props, slice props. Just gonna try deleting. Is it because I need to set this to multi? It should do that for me. Props, slice sprites. I have a feeling I rewrote some animation stuff a few weeks ago, and I have a feeling that I broke something. Slice sprites utilities. I rewrote this system so that it doesn't regenerate the sprites every time. UI props. We're going to change this so instead of modifying every folder of sprites, we're going to just do the forest folder. just for the time being, and I'm gonna have to take a look at that. It could be off camera. I think it'll be off camera because it's gonna be tedious to figure out what I did wrong and require context that I don't feel like fully explaining right now. So prop, slice sprites. Okay, so that generated these two. This generated some weird contextual ones, but sure. And then if we do props anim sprites, that should have now generated a anim prop. Okay, yeah. So it generated idle and animation 1 looping, which if we look at parameters, it's set up that correctly for us. We do need to make it so it sets its default to idle. A little weird it's not doing that on its own. That's also something I should look at for the animation system. And then now if we come into sprite folder to props and hit forest, because there's an animation controller for the sword, because we've generated that, now it should make an anim prop that does have the animation component, so that is the right one. So if we go all the way back to Dungeons Forest W01, click on this one, we should be able to change this out to the anim prop version after we tell it to populate the new options. So the sword will now be something that has been created and it'll know about. And now that's the same sword, but it's an animation version of itself. So assuming that 8:8 is correct, we should then be able to go back to our cutscene, which we've closed that out. So if we close down scripts, go to design data, close down abilities, close down JSONs, close down prefabs, go into our forest W01 sword pickup, add a animation parameter sequence, modify 8:8, which this one does have multiple props, so I'm not sure which index this is going to be on this. I'm going to assume it's going to be only one because this is the only animating prop and only animation props get entity, so actually this should be fine. And then this will be setting a animation bool, so it's going to set a bool. Oh, I had this pinned. Sweet. Okay, we can look at this one for reference. I didn't even mean to click on that. I was just clicking through random tabs trying to get back to where we were. So if we go back into here, it needs prop. That makes sense. And then it's going to be animation _1. Ours is also animation _1. The looping gets cut off, so it can just be a bool. We're setting that bool to true. It doesn't have any duration, and it doesn't have an end on complete, so it'll keep looping forever. And I think that's set up correctly, so the sword should now go to its second state. I am being somewhat dumb. Okay, I think I found an even better way. Just thinking this through, we'll see 2 pieces of dialogue here, and I think this should work now. No, it failed. It failed to find that entity. Sword 24 has an animation. Oh, it did add the _3 to it. It did recognize it as the third prop. Okay. Let me double check that code. I guess I was wrong about, or I was misremembering how that worked. Oh, it's actually inside of tile, isn't it? Oh yeah, the checking for animator is just for initializing the entity, but technically every prop gets its entity ID generated regardless. I could make it work the way I thought it would work, but for now, let's just move forward. So _3 is what we need here because it's the third prop. I guess that's based off of order. So if we look at 8, 8, so 1, 2, 3, and this is the third prop. So 0, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, sure. Not intuitive. I think what I might want to do is add another field in here, especially for custom animation props, where we can give it a specific entity name, and then that gets passed through and used instead of a generated one. That would probably make a lot of this much cleaner and easier to build around. Okay, let's give this one more try, but I realized I'm being kind of dumb because this has an entity component associated with it. I can do more than just the animations. My whole system is built around being able to manipulate entities anywhere on the screen at any time through our sequences. So realistically, rather than having a separate version, yeah, so that just worked. But instead of doing it via an animation and having a whole empty frame of nothingness, what we could do instead is do base set activity, give it the entity ID of this, and then deactivate it instead. And I think that'll turn the prop off. Yeah. So it does need to be an animation prop in order to get the entity ID right now. I think we could refactor that so that we could, I think I'd want to add a custom field to prop data for entity ID. If how do I do this? Or if the prop data has a entity ID string that is not null or empty, add the entity, and then if this is not null or empty, instead of using this entity ID, use the prop data version of it. So if it has an animator, it'll generate one. If it has an entity ID, it'll use that entity ID instead. The question I have, this also means if we come back into this tile and change it from the animation version of the sword to the just standard decor version that I had to begin with. So instead of animation props, we just go decor 24_sword. We just need to show that information here. So if we come back in and edit the script, we need the editor version of this. So prop tile has a lot of references, but if we find references, one of them should be the custom editor. And if we then look under custom, this is where we handle all the extra preset information. We should be able to add another one for entity prop loader. Entity ID. Oh, interesting. We have to bridge the gap somewhere. So this pixel height string, we need a copy of it here. Entity ID. This can be blank. Where does this get used? This is a prop loader. Where did I just modify this? Here. Prop loader data. Pixel height gets put in here. So this is where we need to transfer it. So from the prop loader, we need to pass its data entity ID into here. Now this will have the information we need, and then the editor just needs to make sure that it has the entity ID here, which it does. Is it not set to public? No, it is. Oh, because this is an int field and needs to be a string field. Is that wrong? It's not a pop-up. It's not an enum. I guess I haven't had any string fields. String value. Field. Text field? Sure. That sounds right. So now we can insert an entity ID that'll get passed into the string value of entity ID in here. That will then get used only in one spot, which is getting passed into the loader. And then the loader's variation of that will then get used inside of the tile, which is what we set up in the very first place. Okay, so then if we come into here and we give this custom prop, and if we change this from custom to say like some other version, actually I'll just add a different one to check this, but if we add a different version and we make it like a wall preset, it'll still have an entity ID. So all custom props have an entity ID associated with them. Set this to clear to remove. So if we call this WO, well, it's only ever going to appear in this map anyway, so this can just be sword underscore pickup. Maybe it's like prop underscore sword pickup. And then if we give that as the entity ID here that we want to turn off, now we can have a prop that we can manipulate from a cutscene at a specific moment without needing flags or anything else. This will still need the original system though. Oh my goodness. So we will still need this non-dynamic version of the prop object that is enabled or disabled via flag on room load, because we're going to need to also make this prop remain turned off when you re-enter the room. This will make it so it's off when you interact and have the cutscene. Or not. Failed to find entity. Okay, well the code we wrote was bad. But it surely can be fixed. Did I not hit save? Where is it failing along the way? Let's start by checking our actual tile data. So this is what actually gets generated. Actually, we'll just come up here. Dungeons, Forest, W01. There's 184 tile datas. We're looking for 8:8. That's 4. We need to go further down. That's 11, so we've gone too far. I do want to make like some sort of searcher at some point that like allows me to specifically look at a certain element. 3 more. Okay, this is 8:8. In here, prop datas, we have 4. If we look at the sword, it does have the entity ID. So it does have this data that has been transferred into the actual information we use to load the game. So then the problem has to be somewhere in here. Object equal null. I don't think that's what's happening. If animator is not null, or string is not equal to null or empty. If string is not equal to null or empty, yeah, that's the problem. Just missed the not case. Okay. So this should make it so that we can walk up here, interact, it should find the right entity ID, and it should turn the prop off, and it does. But the problem becomes if we leave this room for W02 and then come back in again, the sword will be there because we only turned it off for that specific moment during that cutscene. So we also still need my prop object displaying based off flag logic that I want. That'll happen on room load. So this will happen at this moment in time, I think, when we go to load the prop. We will check the prop data. We will see... Can we just do this quickly, actually? Is this going to be too difficult? We're going to need a... this is a required flag, is what this is. And we will need a list of required flags. Because it's possible we might need multiples. I feel like this is overcomplicating, but... yeah, it is making this way more complicated than it needs to be. Sure, let's do the very simple version first. Let's assume the prop loader will also have a required flag. Let's go here and create that. Public required flag is of type required flag. Public string. Actually, this is going to be a string value for right now. I would like to make the system work so it's way more flexible, but we're just going to create a new required flag here, which will by default... Does this not have a constructor? It does not. Okay. So we will inline construct then and do required flag ID is equal to the prop loader, this thing. It's going to be equal to this. And then this is comma, I think. Required status will be equal to flag status dot complete. And we won't have any control over anything beyond that. Yeah, so this will now just be editing a string and then constructing a system that says, okay, well, whatever string you put in for a flag ID, we'll just assume that flag needs to be complete. I would like to have way more control to be able to put in maybe multiple flags and have them be in different states in order for a prop to appear or not appear. But that's going to require editing the prop editor system pretty heavily. Flag, backend manager. No, we need the backend manager, backend state manager dot instance dot flag, check flag status, and we're going to check. This has two versions. Both of them take a string, or take an int or a string, but I feel like there's another version of this that could just take the required flag. Rather than me breaking this information out into two variables, we could just have that handle inside of here. Make my life a little easier in some of these situations. I'm not going to go refactor all of them right now, but do check flag, and then we can do prop data dot required flag, pass that in. And if it is not correct, then we will continue, which will skip loading this prop. We will want to update the index, I think, because otherwise it'll get out of order and that'll get weird. I don't want IDs to change in that situation. Okay. Okay. This should just work. So if we come back into the custom prop, it should have a new field. Oh, we need to update the editor too. Okay, close. This needs to happen here as well. Required flag. String value, required flag ID. Okay. And then the required flag in this situation is going to be the cutscene having been completed. So we should be able to just grab the trigger name, which will be also the flag name. And if we go back to the prop and this is why I want it to be customizable, because really I want this to be, this is saying I require the flag to be complete for the prop to appear, is the way this is defaulting in. But I want it to be the opposite. So I guess just to test, thinking, just to test, we will say the flag needs to be not started, I think, in this specific situation. So this will be saying that if this flag is not started, this prop will spawn. Otherwise, if it's active or complete, it won't spawn. Which is confusing without being able to see the enum there, but adding the enum is going to require a little bit more work. Well, it's not too much work to add the enum. It's just trickier to add a list, which is I think what the final version is. Ah, this is great. This has removed every prop. This is weird because I would think every other prop is currently set to... Where's another prop data? Prop data, prop data. Something that has props. Props. Required flag. Empty, not started. So I would think that if it's empty, it would just be ignored. Backend state manager, check flag. I guess this is still hashing an empty string, which is odd. So I think instead, there needs to be some out where it's like if the string is empty, just don't do any of this. I'm just trying to figure out where I would want that to happen. See, if this was a list, I would just have the list be empty, and then we would loop through the list and find that none of them are correct, so we just wouldn't do anything. So I guess this kind of fixes itself once I get it to be a list. We're going to half get it working. If the prop loader required flag string dot is empty null, and we're going to add the not this time. If it's not empty or null, then we're going to construct the list is equal to new list. Probably should just do that every time. And then we will do a dot add here. New. Okay, so only add this required flag to the list if this entry is something. We'll leave it as not started for now. Eventually we'll pass in an enum. And then at the prop tile level here, because it's no longer, no, at the tile level, instead of doing just check status, we'll need to do a for loop on this. If we take a look at other situations where we've had to do this, like here, how do we loop through multiples? There must be situations where we've had to loop through a whole bunch before. Here is available. We'll grab this, bring it over here. Honestly, this should be a... This should probably be a utility function, because I do this so much in so many places. This is actually a required flag state, which I'm not entirely sure what the difference is between these. I feel like there might be two different systems that are kind of doing the same thing right now then. So then we can do If it is not available, continue. We'll change this to is prop visible, which is a little clearer. So if it's not visible, then don't load it. Maybe even better is should. Should prop load? Yeah. Cool. So this should all remain the same. This is all the same. That data is all fine. The main difference here is just when we play, all the props should load number 1. Okay, here we go. Props are loading. Sword is there. We pick up the sword. We turn off the sword via the cutscene. We leave the scene. We come back. The sword is loaded. No! But why? Why? Well, I was excited to go get lunch. And I was hoping this was gonna just work. We're gonna quickly test this and see if we can see where our problem has gone wrong. There's a couple of different spots where this could be failing. So let's just start by checking to see if we ever hit the continue, which I can't imagine we would at this point. Yeah, we're gonna hit this a bunch. Oh, I guess we could actually add a breakpoint in here, because there will only be one that ever has the flag. So we should hit one breakpoint when this loads. Oh, we don't even hit the one breakpoint. Oh, do we need to re-save the... Oh, you know what it is? I bet you... we changed the data, but we didn't resave the game. So I'm just making an edit, resaving, and I think now it should work. Because it hadn't updated our tile data, we had only updated it on the editor side, and without having done the save, it wouldn't have transferred the new list flag operation stuff that we just rewrote, and so the data would have still been an empty list. Yeah, now we're getting in here when we load. I think it's gonna work. So we walk up, we interact to pick up the sword, we get a little cutscene, we turn the sword off. That is turned off only for this instance because the cutscene has turned it off, but we have also set a flag that the cutscene has been completed. And now if we leave and come back in, the secondary system that checks whether or not props should load based off specific flags should hit here. Should. Yeah, there we go. Okay, it hit it. Now we're going to check the required flag. Sword pickup is in the not started state. This is going to go through. It's going to check the flag after doing some logic. It's going to try and get the flag. It found a generic flag, which is completed. And we want it to be not started. So it will fail. This will be false, which means prop should not load, which means we'll continue because we want the not. I think we could flip the function statement around a little bit, but the sword is now not here. The sword is now not here, which is a bit of a reversal, but that's what we're looking for. So now we can change any prop, because it doesn't even have to be an animation prop. Any prop can be given a flag, which, I mean, just to kind of show that, I think that means if we came in here, grabbed this required flag, and added that to this tree post, it shouldn't need an entity ID because that's a completely different system for the cutscenes. But we should be able to enter, trigger the sword, come back, and the sword, the sign should disappear as well. And this will allow us to dynamically change our environments based off specific events. And like I said, I want to build a whole event system for modifying flags based off of game timing so that we can have the world change at certain times of day. I don't think we need to be debugging at this point, so we'll just hit stop. I just want to do this extra little test to validate to myself that everything is working and is flexible. So we see the sign, we see the sword, we pick up the sword via a little cutscene. Sword goes away. The sign did not go away though. Ooh, okay, that'll be an after lunch thing, but we are still unable to walk through this area after the sword is gone. So we will need to build some extra logic for whether or not a tile is walkable. Ooh, that's gonna be tricky, but that'll be a fun thing to dig into. And then we come back in, and the sword is gone, and also the sign is gone, because we made it also be based off of the same cutscene flag. Cool. We don't want that permanently, but I just want to see that is now working. So we can make every prop here disappear, or eventually the walkability stuff I think will be neat, because we could have like grass tiles that are not walkable, but maybe we destroy, like we could even have like some bushes that when you come back at a certain time of the day, the bushes are gone and there's like tiles behind it that you can now walk on and explore parts of the map that you wouldn't or otherwise be able to access except at that specific time of day. Cool. I mean, the event stuff is not functional. We're not celebrating that yet, but this is honestly 90% of the work towards getting that type of stuff up and running, just having these flags. I would like this to be a list, and I would like to be able to set each of these so I can have multiple flags and set what state I want the flag to be in order for this to be visible. Yeah, but we've run a little long today. I did start a little late as well. We're gonna break for lunch and we'll come back around 2 o'clock. For now,